Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, welcome to Be My Guest. Today we have from Vermont the author Elayne Clift, and her book is Poetry Involving the Pandemic, a 21st Century Plague, Poetry for a Pandemic. How appropriate. How time wonderful. Welcome, Elayne.
Thank you so much.
I had not heard of her poetry before, but you have written, not necessarily poetry, but other books you have in the back. When did you start writing completely?
Actually, the answer to that is when I was really young. I always wanted, I didn't feel I wanted to be a writer, but I always felt that I was a writer, and I wrote from a very young age. I submitted my first poem to the Saturday Evening Post when I was 13. It was a Christmas poem.
Yeah.
And when I was in camp, when we had competitions, they always wanted me to write the lyrics and stuff like that. I always enjoyed writing. Mm-hmm. But in terms of being professionally a writer, it started when I was, my early career was in women's health. And I wrote a lot professionally that way. And then when I was an academic, I wrote professionally. And then I worked internationally in health communications. And so in the course of writing professionally and getting published, I began also to just burst with writing, whether it was poetry, short fiction, all journalism. And I just sort of never stopped.
When you went to, after you graduated high school, did you go to college? You have an MA after your name. Where did you go?
Well, I started at Boston University, but I didn't finish there. I finished at University of Maryland, and actually I finished as a returning adult, both my undergraduate and my graduate work.
In what course did you go for?
My undergrad was English and psychology.
Yeah.
And I did English because I thought that I could learn far more about history, psychology, sociology, etc., through literature than just doing a single track. And then my master's is in health communications, which is not about how you talk to your doctor. It's a very complex methodology about behavior change through communication that isn't like health education top down, this is what you have to do. It's bottom up, where you start with the culture and the belief systems of people and developing your messages. And it's very multidisciplinary, but it was in health communication.
Yeah, well, now, her book, A 21st Century Plague, Poetry from a Pandemic. What made you decide to write this? The pandemic itself, the whole inspiration? And there are other people in this too.
Oh, 53 other people.
Yeah.
So I have published 2 collections of poetry, and I have been published fairly widely, actually internationally, in poetry as well as prose. So this book came about because I was, well, first of all, in March of 2020, my husband and I and my daughter and son-in-law had to cancel a trip together to Spain and to England. My husband's British, and the kids had invited us to join them for their 5th anniversary in Spain, which I thought was fabulous that your kids would do that, but we all had to not go. And so around the spring, I was trying to feel kind of upbeat and hopeful. This was not going to last forever. We'd survived the big pandemic of 1918, but it was going to be difficult. And so one day in May, I was sitting on my sun porch. I live in rural Vermont, and I love May in Vermont, and the early flowers and colors were blooming and so forth. And so I wrote kind of a nature poem about how we would get through this, and it was a time to quiet down, etc. By July, it was getting really harder, and I was realizing how really seriously prolonged and hard this was going to be. And I wrote another poem in which I tried to be a bit playful with it, to lighten it up a little bit. And then in September, I wrote a very serious poem about what we were all going through and how we were coping. So that was sort of actually following the trajectory of how the pandemic was going. And I began to think, well, what are other people writing? What are they feeling? What do they need to say to the world? And that was when I got the idea for the book and then wrote the proposal and started to pitch it and so forth. So the book itself has taken about a year.
Did you design the cover?
No, I didn't. And to be honest with you, I don't like the cover.
You don't?
No. But people have I'll tell you why in a minute, but people have had about a 50-50 response to this. The publisher has a sort of stable of writers, and the contract includes the fact that we can't vote or have whatever about. But I'll just tell you why quickly, and I've told this to the publisher. I didn't like that it was black, the cover, because this is not a book about death, it's about living through a pandemic. I didn't like this monstrous viral thing in the window that seemed to have annihilated all the people in the room. And I wanted a softer font, but the really big one that stuck on my crawl was, you should never, this is me as the English major, you should never, and the writer, you don't separate the words in the primary title. So I felt that, but people have liked it, I just happen to not like it.
When I look at it, this is amazing. I didn't see the pandemic thing with all of its little gizmos. I saw floral.
Oh.
Like a floral background in someone's living room.
Oh.
So that's one of the joys of self-publishing is you do your own.
Yes.
That's, I think, the best way to go.
Yeah, I have self-published and I have had fabulous covers.
Yeah.
And
that's
when you
the best
self-publish, you decide everything. The font, you make sure they write justify, you make sure that you're in charge of everything. So I'm really spoiled from
I
self-publishing.
tell a lot of the authors that I help, go with the self-publishing. If you're really, really strong about your front cover, and I understand, go that way.
But I've given courses on self-publishing. You have to have the entrepreneurial skills that go with that.
Sure.
Because if you can't, distribute and really promote your book, nobody else is going to do that
That's
for you.
why I'm there.
And you
I
have
help
to
them.
have the funds to do it.
Sure, and that's why I'm there to help them as a publicist. We get them out there and that
Yeah.
type of thing. Let's look at page 14. This is your beginning of Elayne Clift's Pandemic Trilogy. Read for us your Pandemic Pleasures. Pick what you'd like to read. All of them are great.
Well, what I usually do is, the first poem is kind of a nature poem, and it's nice, but what I usually do is like to share the second one, Pandemic. The first one is called Pandemic Pleasures.
Yeah.
The second one is called Pandemic Liberation, and the third one is called Pandemic Pain, and what I'd like to do is share those two.
Go for it.
No makeup, manicures, or matching clothes, although I do miss the occasional massage. No big girl shoes, or iron shirts, or bothersome bras. No potluck pressure or parties for which I, quote, have prior plans. No cheek-to-cheek kisses or unwanted hugs, although one from a loved one would be grand. No worries about my hair or how I look, or for that matter, what I cook. No deadlines to meet, I'm happy to say, except for an occasional library book. Although I confess some compensation for a class or oration would certainly be cause for celebration. When this nasty bug is over and gone, it will occasion song, dance, and song. And I will welcome that, of course. But while enjoying its demise with good cheer and libations, I have to admit it's likely that I will miss the liberations.
Is that the first one you wrote about it, or was the other one?
No, Pandemic Trilogy came first.
That came
No, sorry, Pandemic
Pleasures?
came first. Yeah, that was in May.
Uh-huh.
That one I just read was in July, and
Okay.
the final one was in September. So the final one is called Pandemic Pain, and by that time, like this time of year, we were starting to think about winter closing in, and really had sort of had enough of the isolation. So this poem is Pandemic Pain. In the beginning, while in survival mode, we masked, distanced, and washed our hands like mad Lady Macbeth. Hoping the virus would bypass us, lucky ones, untouched, safe, exempt. Then as the weeks wore on, we found ourselves frayed and frightened, anxious and depressed, while the beast grew bolder. Entering crisis mode, tempers flared, tears flowed. Trips for groceries became another call for celebration. Haircuts a miraculous event, release from house arrest. Precious family and friends risked distant contact at outdoor lunch. Resumed, FaceTime, Skyped, vowing to carry on in COVID solitude, awaiting the darkness of winter.
That's really good. I mean, it just goes right to how you feel. When you were writing these, did you feel that super cut off feeling? I never got the super cut off feeling.
Well, we managed to socialize with friends that we trusted. We'd all been vaccinated. We were vaccinated, I think, but no, not. But we weren't vaccinated. But in that first summer, we did with people that we trusted. We did outdoor porch sort of stuff. Like I'm talking about 3 or 4 people. I did not see my son for 15 months, who lives in Florida, which is a bad state.
Yeah.
And my daughter and son-in-law in Brooklyn, they were very concerned about us because of our age group. So they they didn't come up for a while, and when they did, they didn't stay with us, and they were masked. We were always masked.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I did and I'm very gregarious, so I really missed all the social stuff, and all my volunteer work went down the drain, and all my teaching all had to be on Zoom.
Yeah.
Still is. So
Zoom
yes,
is okay. It's almost like Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm
it
not
was,
a big fan of it.
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, of Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful for the technology, or we'd have nothing.
Yeah.
But I am very much aware of Zoom fatigue. I'm very tired after I teach a 2-hour
yeah.
class on Zoom.
Are things picking up now? Are you getting out more about your book?
Oh, I've done a lot of publicity. In fact, next week is the last of many, many, many readings. Most on Zoom, some in person. I've done a lot of media interviews myself, and we've gotten reviews out and so forth. So yeah, it's been a long time.
So many. Well, are you going to read us the first one, The Pandemic Pleasures? That's the first one you wrote on it.
Okay.
Read that one.
Okay. Pandemic Pleasures. Abundant azaleas, pink and profuse, brush my window, beneath azure blue skies hosting puffy white clouds. As they mosey on by, trees sway, lithe and graceful, to the rustle of a gentle breeze, patiently waiting for summer leaves. A wall of golden forsythia and early green grass from nature's altar beyond the glass. A red-breasted grosbeak and a yellow finch feast at bird feeders enjoying their lunch. Book in hand, hope still high, that scourges end by and by. When this one does, as it surely will, may our hearts lift, our spirits soar. For like birds, blue skies, and springtime blooms, our lives will once again resume. Changed, challenged, mournful alas, but together, having made it through, we will live to celebrate another spring, strong, resilient, grateful too, no matter what the future brings.
Those are 3 terrific poems, and so timely, as we know.
I
You going to make any more poems like this, or are you in with you're done with the COVID?
With the pandemic poems, probably not.
You're not going to do
No.
anything more. What
No.
were your first books that you wrote? Tell me about those, because I hadn't heard of them.
Well, I wrote early on a memoir about growing up, as I said, growing up as a Jewish minority in the 1950s in small town America, which was a town in New Jersey. My father was a merchant there, and so that and the hook around that was the idea of being a minority, but also that my mother was suffered from depression, and so that made my childhood very difficult. And so there was a lot. It wasn't like I had, up to the age of 18, had a fabulous life to tell you about. It's that these were the challenges in that time of the 1950s. So that was an early one. My first poetry book was called Demons Dancing in My Head, and that was selected poems between 1985 and 95, I think it is. The second book of poetry was Other People, Other Lands, because my husband and I have both worked, we love traveling anyway, but we both worked internationally, and my husband's British, so we would get home leave from his employer to England every 2 years, and we would always travel. So Other People, Other Lands is about amazing people that I had met on these journeys. And then I did several, I was publishing all the time, short stories, and so I did 3 collections, and the most recent one is called Children of the Chalet, and it was based on, it did win an award for fiction. The title derives from the fact that when I was young and single, I was a counselor in a halfway house for girls in Seattle, Washington. And what I did with that book was I highly fictionalized the stories of the girls who were in my care, and also the counselor, who was me. And then I imagined those people as adults.
What were they? It was a halfway house. Was it recovery from addiction?
No, in those days, that was the 1960s.
Yeah.
In those days, these kids, honestly, they were not that bad, but they were troublesome. They were troublesome in school behavior, truancy. Some had mental health issues and family issues and stuff. So honestly, these days, it was the 1960s. I'll just say that it wasn't like it is now.
What brought you to be interested in? Were you volunteering or literally?
No, it was my job. Yeah.
Gosh, what drew you to that?
I just have always been very, I guess, socially conscious and always interested. Always interested in social issues and healthcare issues. And I mean, I probably am a frustrated practitioner. I should have been a nurse midwife, and I was a doula. So
You were?
Yeah.
By any chance, did you also practice that in Rhode Island?
No,
Doula? No?
Brattleboro Hospital.
No, because a friend of mine and her husband had their baby in a tent.
Yeah.
She was 40, I think, and she had it in the tent.
Yeah. Well, we did hospital births, but that's one of the things I had to give up with COVID because they couldn't be at the doula program. Nobody was allowed in the birth room but the partner.
So have you had like a variety of jobs up through the years while you're writing?
Oh, yeah. So I've had 3 iterations in my career. I started out in women's health. I was the first program director for the National Women's Health Network in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
That was an education and advocacy organization. We weren't allowed to call ourselves lobbyists, but we sort of were. But we were policy analysts, and it was just an extraordinary time. The women's health movement was going gangbusters. That was in the late 70s. And I that's when I started doing media work because I was the spokesperson for the group, and it was just fabulous. Unfortunately, I was messed about in that position because I got to be the public figure of that group, and the director didn't like that.
Oh.
So then I actually was out of work I lost that job, and I was out of work for a long time because it was the Reagan administration, and non-governmental organizations weren't getting funded. So at that time, I went back to graduate school and got my degree in health communications and began working internationally in basically health education and behavior around child survival and maternal health issues. And then in the course of that, because of that, I started writing professionally, and I was also invited, even though I only had a master's, I was invited to teach at Yale. And I taught a lot of schools ranging from community college to Yale, and spent a year teaching in Thailand as well, which was amazing. So I've had, the whole time, I've had the women's health thing, the literary thing, the health communications, international development work thing, and they all sort of come together.
We're talking with Elayne Clift, and she has written this book, A 21st Century Plague, Poetry for a Pandemic. How can they get a hold of your book?
So the best way to get a hold of the book is to ask your local bookseller to order it. Any bookstore can do that. They will all know that it's distributed by Ingram. They will go there to get it. And so that's the best way to get it. But you can also get it directly from the publisher, which is universityprofessorspress.com. I really advise you to get it from your bookstore because sometimes the press is slow now with just getting things out, distribution, supply chain, and everything. They're slow to get things out. Yeah. So really, and Amazon, of course, which I don't really like, but it's there, and you can certainly buy the book there.
Sure. Also, at our Upton Library, she's going to be donating one to our dedicated authors, local authors. She's local. She's in New England, right? Mm-hmm. We have authors from New York too. Mm-hmm. So you can catch one there if you're in the area. You can borrow it, read it, love it.
Yeah.
You could. Can they reach you and to comment on your book? You have a site, don't you?
I have a website which is Elayne with a Y, ELAYNE -Clift, CLIF like Frank, T like Tom.com. And actually, I am a columnist for a number of New England newspapers, and so you can always read my commentary and my political rants, and I am definitely left of center. They're posted there. All of my books, my biographies and stuff like that are on the website. Or if you want to, you can email me at eclift@vermonttel.net and just spell Vermont and add an EL, vermonttel.net.
You mentioned a memoir, a couple of memoirs, right? Was one of them about what you went through as a child with your mom who had her issues?
Well, that was my memoir of growing up in that time.
Can we still get that book? Because that sounds fascinating.
No, it's out of print. It's out of print now.
God, was that your first book that you published?
No. Well, I can't remember which came first because my first book of essays was called Telling It Like It Is.
Yeah.
And then 2 more essay books came, and they came in rapid succession. So, and the other 2 fiction short stories. One was called for the moment I'm forgetting the name. The Limits of Love. And that had an interesting premise. And the first one was called Croning Tales because when I was 50, I had a croning celebration because I was becoming a wise elder, and we were reclaiming that word that had been really maligned in the public view.
Yeah, definitely. She has quite a table of contents here. 52 authors, did you say?
53.
53.
And there should have been 54. I was heartbroken that the publisher, which was an academic press, removed one of the poems by a wonderful poet called Lynn Unger. She's in Oregon, and the poem they took out was called Pandemic, and I urge you to search it online. It's very easy to find, or read it in it's not in the book. But the reason that happened was that being an academic press, they wanted official permission from any place that a poem had appeared before. And she went so viral, she couldn't figure out where the first place was. So they made us take the poem out. So when I've done public readings, I always read her poem. There's another one in the book by somebody who went viral as well, who was he is an Irish monk, a Franciscan monk in Dublin. And his poem was called Lockdown, and that's another wonderful one to read. And I was able to track him down through the Irish Times because they had done a story. So it's basically, it is international. There's a poet from Oxford, England. There's an Indian poet. But 53 poets and 70 poems. There should have been 71.
How did you connect with all the people to come on board with you with the book?
So I advertised, I ran an ad in the Poets and Writers, which is the magazine that most poets will look at the marketing section. So and then I put it on Facebook, and I have a listserv for my columns, and that went to all of them and anyone I could think of. And honestly, within 2 weeks of putting that out there, I had received over 100 poems, and 70 of them made the book.
That is good. Now that one that the publisher left out, that's kind of weird because
it would be in the public domain by that time.
Huh.
You could get it anywhere.
And they're that tight with their publishing that they won't let someone.
I'm not going to even go there.
That's interesting to know, because we have a poet who's on here from New York City off and on through the years. He has never mentioned it. He always, I think or has a friend do his covers. He's also a stage director in New York City. He never mentioned that, but that is fascinating to me.
University presses not always are difficult, but because they're so rigid in the requirements, but often they are difficult, and they are much more stringent and controlling than other presses.
Can you get to another publisher? Maybe change?
No, I wouldn't.
No?
I wouldn't
You
do
wouldn't
that.
do that?
No, I think it's in the contract even that I can't do that.
Oh, no.
No.
There is one here. I was going through this last night. When This Is Over by Marianne Camberg. I want to read it, or do you want to read it?
You can read it.
Okay.
It's the last poem in the book.
I love this because when this is over, we're talking about the pandemic, I'll change out of pajamas, wear makeup, get a gel manicure, cut and color my hair. I'll cheer the Royals at the K, dine at Q39 on Angus beef brisket and cucumber salad with dill vinaigrette. I'll donate old clothes, beat Rosemary for Cokes, my sister for lunch, return mail order biscuits to Kohl's. I'll skip Zoom classes, take Tai Chi at the dojo, lounge at the pool, buy new sunglasses, drive through the car wash. I'll buy just 1 4-pack of toilet paper and a dozen jumbo eggs. Fix a family dinner, squeeze my grandkids till they squeal. Oh, that is cute.
So I'm really glad you chose to read that one because just as my 3 poems sort of followed the trajectory of the experience, I tried to make the book do that. So the very first poem in the book is about the plague in the 1600s.
Yeah.
And so we start with that historical thing and then move through. And another thing I like to point out is that it's not a dark hole that you go down in this book. This is a book about supporting and validating and sharing our own experiences, whether they're individual or collective. And so some of the poems really do bring tears to your eyes. They're very poignant, but some of them are humorous. And if there's time, I'm going to share one of the humorous poems.
Go for it. Go.
So this is a poem called "After Months Missing the Crowded Subway" by Charlotte Friedman. And the reason I love this poem, not only that it's humorous, but the day I got this poem, my daughter, who lives in Brooklyn and has to commute to Manhattan, said to me, "I'm never getting on the subway again. I hate the subway, can't stand the subway."
Yeah.
So this is Charlotte Friedman's take. "I want to go back to the crush, close, push, press of unfamiliar bodies, sweat, stink, and soft punch of day-old powdery perfume, scent of strawberry shampoo from someone's still wet hair. I want the lurch, lean, sharp stop, oh sorry, quick slide slip of hands, making room on a metal pole for one more. Would that I could feel a stranger's lycra thigh against me in an orange plastic seat. Oh yes, I'd praise exploding gems on a screen, small victories seen over a shoulder, and wouldn't even flinch from an unlikely pinch. Let my eyes roam over a muscled bicep, inked blue, mute red serpent disappearing under the sleeve of a black tee. I'd stargaze at nails bejeweled in tropical brilliance, then lose myself to the pink shell of a girl's ear, a nape's shadowy curve. I think I'll bypass my stop.
Do you know her personally?
No.
Do you know any of them personally?
Well, the ones that are in the Vermont, New Hampshire area, I do. All right, but some of them I didn't until we do the readings a lot, so I got to know. And then because we did Zoom readings that were national, I got to meet, at least visually, a lot of the writers. And I just have to say, their poems are brilliant. It's beautiful to hear them, to read them, but also to hear them read them. And they have been so wonderful. This was a very difficult book to get done, partly because it was an academic publisher. And they have just been wonderful, always jumping in to read and reading beautifully. And so we've become like a family, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, the local ones, I'm going to potluck with the local ones who've been reading with me so much.
Is it a writers group that you belong to as well?
Well, I belong to Right Action, but it's not only a couple of poems happen to be from there.
Yeah.
We have 6. This was like a serendipitous thing. There are 6 poets from Minnesota in the book, and they were just interviewed on Minnesota Public Radio, and they're doing a reading next week. All 6 of them in St. Louis, in St. Paul, Minnesota. So everybody has just really been there, you know, and we've all bonded. It's just been amazing and really a gift to me because they've been the readers and the writers have been so appreciative that I did the book and so proud to be in the book. And their writing is so beautiful. It's really a gift.
Elayne, are you going to be, we've got about 3 minutes left, where are you going to be presenting next? Where are you going to be appearing?
Well, the last thing we're doing, the last one on the list is next week, and it's at a assisted living place in Keene, New Hampshire.
Oh, my brother lived up there.
And it's they have a poetry group, and it's for their poetry group. It's not open to the public.
Sure, yeah.
But we've done lots and lots of them all over the place, and they've just all been wonderful.
So you're going to go to the assisted living up there.
Yeah, and I had to cancel 2 in California because
yeah.
because I was supposed to be in California doing workshops, and the workshops were canceled for COVID, so I couldn't do the readings.
It must be good to get out again.
It's starting. It's starting. We're still very cautious, but it's starting.
When she drove down all the way from Vermont today, and hands off to you because I'm not a long distance traveler, but we have guests who think nothing of it.
Yeah.
They just, sure.
Yeah.
Is there, before we close, Elayne, is there a locations that you prefer if somebody would like you to come and give your presentation and your book signings? Is there anywhere you think is too far, or would you rather stay in?
I'll go anywhere that I don't have to fly to.
Oh, you don't get in a plane?
No, but only because of COVID.
Oh, okay, yeah, I got it. It's both that and I will not get in a plane. To me,
No, I mean, I would say obviously not more than 2 hours, but I would do that. I would have, we're staying over in Boston tonight to go to the museum, but I would have done a round trip on this.
I don't know if many people knew it, but Dean Martin would never fly. He called it the same thing I do, a flying coffin.
Wow.
My father was world traveled. Oh, come on, there's nothing to it. You know, it's safer than your car. I said, but Dad, if you fall out of the sky in the ocean, what do you think your odds are of A, being found, and B, getting to a hospital?
Yeah.
Whereas here on terra firma, you're going to have an ambulance and maybe the life flight. And there's nothing they can come back with because it's true.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not a happy flyer, and I have flown, I would say, I don't know if I could say millions of miles, but I've flown hundreds of thousands of miles from work and pleasure. No, I tolerate it. I don't like it. And I'll tell you what makes me nervous now, besides COVID, is the behavior of people on the planes.
Why are people going so bananas on a plane? I don't get it.
I think there's so much pent-up rage because of COVID, because of Trump and the politics of that time, that it's a very frightening time, you know. But honestly, I worry about that, and I just don't like flying in general. My brother was in the Air Force, and he said if you get it up, you're likely to get it down, and nothing usually happens when you're up.
So your brother was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Our producer and videographer, Paul, was in the... What years was he in the Air Force?
During the Vietnam War.
Huh?
During the Vietnam War.
Okay, Paul was in Japan. He'll tell you after the show, but yeah. Thank you for being with us, Elayne.
Oh,
I know
thank you so
made a long
much.
trip to come down.
Thank you so much.
The 21st Century Plague, Poetry from a Pandemic. Can we relate to this? And you'll find a copy in the Upton Town Library, dedicated local authors section. And one more time, how can they get a hold of you and your book?
So you can get the book from a bookstore easy, and you can get in touch with me also easily on my website, www.Elayne with a Y, hyphen, not underscore, hyphen Clift.com, or my email is eclift@vermontel, VERMONTEL.net. And I really, really would love to go to any venue which would have me or wants me to Zoom about it, because I talk a lot about poetry as a story form and how it relates to our experience. I'm actually teaching a class about how the pandemic has made people in my age group contemplate their own mortality and really think about how they want to live the rest of their lives.
Sure.
And I thought maybe 8 people would do it, and I got 20 people doing it.
There you go.
Thank you,
Elayne.
Thank you so
See
much.
you next time with you, my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.